In this video, I will be attempting to survive 100 days in the Philippines in hardcore Minecraft. This means I'll have to survive the extreme weather, aggressive wildlife, and the terrifying mythical creatures that I'll find here, all while I build myself a base for survival and explore these incredible islands. Now with that being said, let's get started. Now before we get into the video, let me tell you about something that I think any Minecraft player would be interested in, and that is Nether blocks. Nether blocks offers unique magnetic blocks that bring your favorite Minecraft builds to life, while also inspiring creative play for literally all ages. You can find your very own set over at netherblocks.com, and be sure to use code SMITTY for 15% off at checkout. Yeah, I'll be honest, I choose my sponsors very carefully, but this one actually looks really fun. But with that being said, let's get started with day. I spawned in and took a look around me, only to see that I was near a large river, and a couple of animals. Seems to be a lively little river here. Oh, hello. What are you? And more importantly, can I eat you? Okay, you fight back. You fight back. Alright, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, after discovering that this thing fights back, I decided to just get some wood. From here, I crafted a wooden pickaxe, and then went to find some stone. Only I found something else instead. That's a cobra. That is a cobra. Yeah, I kept my distance from this guy, until it began to chase me. No. Ooh, it's kind of fast. I ran around these rocks and eventually lost it. This meant I could finally do some mining. I collected some cobblestone and then crafted stone tools. Before then, crafting a boat and setting off down the river. Now, because I had seen a cobra, that meant that I was in the northern or central part of the Philippines, likely on the island of Luzon, where the Philippine cobra resides. But that didn't matter anymore, as my current objective was to get a bed crafted before nightfall. However, after a bit of rowing, it looked like I might not have to craft one. I went around and took some lanterns, before then entering the houses and seeing beds. Oh, I also saw this furnace that I quickly took. Anyways, I then did some turtle fishing, as I really needed food. But yeah, I got nothing from these guys. And so, I continued down the river, right as the sun began to set. I set up camp here and then went to sleep. And first thing the next morning, I started to smelt some sand. So far, I was off to a good start. But now I had a new objective in mind, and that was to reach the ocean, as I am making a boat base for this episode. With that being said, I continued to follow the river. And after a bit of rowing, I spotted a rather important animal of the Philippines. But we'll talk more about them later, as I was on a mission. However, as I continued down the river, I realized that I really did need some food. And I needed it soon. Luckily for me, as I entered this lake area, I saw some arowanas in the water, so I did some crude fishing. The sun soon began to set once more. On day 3, I headed back to the river to search for the ocean. Yet, as I rowed, I noticed large mountains forming around me. And soon enough, something came into view. Something that looked very different from the landscape around it. The Batad Rice Terraces. Located in Banawe, a municipality in the mountains of Luzon, these ancient rice terraces attract tourists from around the world, as these terraces have been here for around 2,000 years. This has not only secured its title as a World Heritage Site, but this has also led many of the locals to refer to it as the 8th wonder of the world. And it certainly has that quality to it, because these rice terraces have survived the entire history of this country, a history that we'll take a look at throughout this episode. But for now, I was already making my way up to one of these small buildings. Inside this one was a collection of barrels and chests. I decided to go ahead and take some barrels from my ship. Oh, and speaking of, I need to get back to my search for the ocean. So I headed down to the river. That is, until it reached a dead end. So I made a bold decision to continue west until I reached the ocean. And with that, I began my mountain trek. These travels continued into the next day, where I stumbled across this snake, but I quickly killed it. Yeah, I was climbing through so much terrain, but eventually, my hard work paid off, as by that evening, I could see the ocean. So that meant it was time to get started on my boat base. Now, for a fully functioning boat, I needed to craft 3 things: an engine, a helm, and floaters. So that basically meant that I had to do a lot of mining. But yeah, there was no iron or gold to be found anywhere. Oh, but get this, I found diamonds. Oh, and I found even more diamonds. And it's funny because I can't even mine them yet. So instead, I decided to focus on getting the string for the floaters. And for that, I would have to wait for nightfall. I cautiously killed as many spiders as I could. But there were also zombies everywhere. By the end of the night, I had collected 8 string, which was plenty. So the next morning, I returned to the mines. And while I hopelessly mine for gold and iron, let's discuss what my objective is for this video. See, the Philippines hosts an incredible amount of wildlife, wonders, and history, all of which we'll be exploring in this video. However, the Philippines is also home to some of the most unique and downright terrifying folklore. So in this video, I'll be hunting 4 of the most notorious mythical creatures in the Philippines, starting with the tikbalang. The tikbalang is a creature that appears to be half man, half horse, using its hooved feet to lurk within the forests and mountains of the Philippines. This creature is often said to be evil, and supposedly the legend of the tikbalang dates back thousands of years. Regardless, I will be hunting this ancient creature in Palawan. So that's why I have to get this boat going rather soon. But luckily for me, I just found iron, so I got right to smelting it. And after crafting an iron pickaxe, I went and mined the diamonds. But now I just needed gold. So next day, I headed up into the mountains, hoping I'd have more luck here. At this point, I was completely out of food. However, after finding some coal, I ended up finding the very ore I was looking for. So I smelted it and crafted the helm. That's when I realized that I just needed 1 more iron bar for the engine. So on day 8, I got right back to mining. And it wasn't long until I found some more iron. Now I could finally craft the engine, which I did. This meant that it was time to make my boat. I got right to work on the shape of it. See, I want a really simple first design, as I will definitely be improving on it later. But with that being said, I placed the floaters on day 9, and started shaping the boat even more. A thunderstorm started up though, which interrupted my construction. In fact, I had to go ahead and assemble the ship right here. So I did just that. And you know what? It floats. The very next morning, I set off for Palawan. I watched as the shore slowly faded away, and before I knew it, I was in the open ocean. Yeah, my boat didn't look great yet, but that was soon the least of my concerns. These guys were huge. So I just kept sailing. And that was basically all I did for the rest of the day. In fact, the next few days just consisted of a lot of open ocean sailing. Not much happened, outside of a few vibrant sunsets. But by the time day 14 rolled around, I knew that I would need food soon. Only I was very much not looking forward to getting it. Yet, when I saw this kelp forest come into view, I realized that this would be my only opportunity. So I reluctantly jumped right into the ocean. I was able to collect some kelp, but there were also a lot of drowned down here. Except they weren't the only threat in the water. Ooh. Oh, hi. Yeah, I suddenly saw tons of jellyfish around me. And these were box jellyfish, a very dangerous type of jellyfish found throughout the Philippines. So yeah, I was in a bit of a panic. Especially since a trident was now being thrown at me. Oh, that's a trident. Soon enough, I made it back onto my ship unharmed. And I now had a lot of kelp to cook. So while the furnace was busy, I decided to sail through the night. And this turned out to be a great idea. Bioluminescence. Compared to the rest of the world, this natural phenomenon is common in the Philippines. And it never disappoints. Look at that. Look at that. By now, I knew that I had to be nearing the island. As day 15 went on, I steadily continued southeast. That is, until I finally saw land. That's right, I had reached Palawan, known to be one of the most stunning locations in all of the Philippines. The island itself is the 5th largest in the country, and here many of the locals still partake in a traditional lifestyle, where fishing and agriculture are heavily relied upon. Next morning, I decided to continue sailing along the coast for a bit, as I wanted to find the mountainous center of the island, where I would hopefully find the tikbalong. But I soon had to pause that plan, as I saw some animals near the shore. After seeing that I had found a binturong, I knew immediately that this would be my companion. So I crafted a knife and collected some straw, before finally crafting a lead. And from here, I just had to get him in my boat, which is much easier said than done. Yeah, he just either kept moving or didn't move at all, which was a bit frustrating. I couldn't even get him in the boat before nightfall, so the next day, I built an entire staircase. And finally, I was able to get him on board. So with that done, Basket and I continued down the coast. And yes, Basket is what I decided to name him. I have no idea why, but then again, do I ever know why? Anyways, as we sailed into the afternoon, my boat became unbearably slow, as it had run out of fuel. So I decided to disembark here and go by foot. I made my way up through the mountainous terrain and headed inland, hoping to reach the center of the island. However, little did I know, the hunt had already begun. No thanks. I immediately froze, and then cautiously looked around me. And that's when I saw something. It was staring at me from behind the leaves. You know, I can't actually see you behind those leaves. You're not very good at hiding, are ya? If this was the Tikbalong, I was definitely not ready to fight it. So I ran. Yeah, I'm not ready for this. And when I got to the shore, I turned around and looked behind me. Only to see, well, nothing. I decided to just get in my boat and row from here. Yeah, I could only assume that I had just encountered the creature, as that did not look like any wildlife that you would normally see here. But my concerns soon faded, as I was distracted by the appearance of buildings in the distance. And it seems as though I had found a town. I rode along multiple buildings before then entering this bay. Within the bay, I saw this lone tower, which I decided to approach and climb up. Suddenly, a burst of fireflies emerged from the trees in front of me. Now that is pretty cool. But that was soon followed by some rain. So, I just headed back to the town to sleep. Next morning, I decided to explore the town some. After looking through some of the buildings, I knew I would have to come back later with my ship. After all, I had a mythical creature to hunt now, and apparently I was in the right location. I headed to the edge of the forest, and before entering it, I crafted a shield. After climbing through the hot mountainous terrain, I saw that I needed food. So I headed down towards the shore, and ended up rowing for a while in search of fish. Yet it wasn't fish that I found. No, instead, I found a huge rock formation, with a large cave jutting right into it. The Puerto Princesa subterranean river. Over 8 kilometers or 5 miles of a cavern-enclosed river that showcases not only incredible limestone rock formations, but also a special mix of both ocean and mountain ecosystems thanks to the river's location. Tours frequently traverse the length of the subterranean river, but in a careful manner, as this area is well protected due to the biodiversity that it boasts. I decided to enter the river the next morning, but I had to fight some mobs at the entrance first. As I made my way into this cavernous room, I saw this giant centipede and just decided to walk around the mobs. After entering the next room, though, I was finally alone. So, I placed my boat down and began to row. The river was certainly cool, but it was also slightly eerie. I made my way further down the cavernous river. But then, everything changed. Oh no. I quickly got my axe out and slowly continued. And then I saw it. My first response was to row away fast, but I came to my senses and realized that this was the time to fight it. So, I went for it. This was a mistake. It was now swimming after me, and it was fast. I swam through the winding rocky paths as fast as I could. After a lot of frantic swimming, I finally reached the entrance to the cave. Yeah, I knew that even though I barely escaped, I would have to find it again soon, because I still have 3 other creatures to hunt. As my hunt continued into day 21, I hiked through the nearby mountains, and ended up finding a path to follow. But as I walked along the path, I was greeted by some water monitors. Opting to keep following the trail, I found myself now walking up a really steep hill. At the top of the hill was a cave opening, and upon entering the cave, it was clear that this wasn't just a normal cave. These skulls told me exactly what I would find here. As it turns out, my hunt would be over shortly, as this was most certainly where the Tikbalong spawns. I slowly made my way down one of the paths, until my theory was unfortunately confirmed. Once again, I found myself in a chase, and it looked as though I was the slower one. I leapt out of the cave and ran down the path, but the Tikbalong followed right behind me. So I had no choice but to jump into the water. And of course, when I turned around, it wasn't there. Yeah, it was time for me to take this hunt a little more seriously, and to do that, I would need armor. I continued mining through the next morning. Even though I found iron, it was only a vein of 3. But I found a lot more shortly after. So with that, I began smelting, and was able to craft myself a chest plate. Now I needed food, so I crafted a fishing rod, and got right to it. I caught a decent amount of fish before nightfall. And on day 23, I decided that I was ready to finally take down the Tikbalong. So I walked up the path and entered the cave. From here, I cautiously walked through the dark rooms. But it wasn't where I had seen it before. In fact, I just ended up getting attacked by cave spiders. But on a good note, I found another 4 iron. So, after staying the night here, I left the cave the next morning and refilled my water. I also did some fishing and ended up smelting the iron, which I made into a helmet. Now I was ready for attempt number 2. I slowly headed back into the cave, and this time, it wasn't missing. It was so fast that I honestly don't even know what happened here. What I do know is that damage was being dealt to me, so I had to run. Thinking quickly, I towered up. And that's when I discovered its weakness. It couldn't hit me from down there, so I started trying to hit it from up here. And every now and then, I was actually successful. This thing was so hard to hit. And even when I did hit it, sometimes these purple particles would just block it. But I knew that this was it. I had to keep dealing damage. And eventually, after dealing multiple successful hits, I defeated the Tikbalong. That's right, the first mythical creature of the Philippines had just been defeated, which meant that it was time to bring my boat around to the village. So with that being said, I made my way north the next morning, and didn't actually reach the boat until the early afternoon. And Basket had been patiently waiting here. He really has no idea what I just went through. Anyways, as Basket and I made our way down to the village on day 26, let's discuss the next mythical creature that I'll be hunting, because this one is nothing like the Tikbalong. The Chanak, a deadly vampiric creature that presents itself as a baby, using its cries to lure unsuspecting travelers to their deaths. This creature may not be as intimidating as the last one, but it is relentlessly evil and dangerously fast. I will be hunting the Chanak on the island from which it originated, Mindanao. But for now, I had a town to get to. A town that I arrived at on day 27. As I looked around it again, I realized that I hadn't even properly looked through the loot here. This became apparent when I found a lot of useful stuff, like ube, a special type of yam found all throughout Filipino cuisine. I also found more practical things like the backpack and a canteen. And so, with my new findings in mind, I decided that it was time for a proper ship upgrade. I collected tons of birch wood that afternoon, and the next morning, I got to work on the new boat. I made this one much longer, as I wanted to replicate a traditional Filipino boat. I ended up adding an oak trim today, before crafting a new engine on day 29. From here, I made the main cabin area, and finished the entire structure the next morning. I added all of my storage items, and by that evening, I just had to transfer everything from my old boat to my new one. So I got right to work on that the next day. I transferred all of the floaters before replacing the helm. And hey, this boat also floats. Now I just had one more thing to transfer, and that was, of course, Basket. Yes, once again, this was a chore. Basket hates cooperation, so I went with the giant staircase tactic again, and it ended up working. So with my new ship crafted, and Basket on board, it was time to set off for the next island. I said my goodbyes to Palawan, before heading in the direction of Mindanao. Day 32 was a rainy day. I was heading southeast at a decent speed, but as I progressed through the salty waters, some shapes emerged below the surface. Just like last time, I decided to ignore the sharks and just kept sailing on. Not much happened for the rest of the day. The weather had become violent, and there was a huge cyclone nearby. Yeah, Basket was starting to get pulled in the direction of the cyclone. So I had to sail as far away from it as I could. Eventually, after enough sailing, the weather began to clear. But I didn't celebrate, as I knew this would be a common occurrence. See, the Philippines unfortunately holds the title of the most disaster-prone country in the world. A title that is held for the last 16 years. Disasters aside, my attention was soon caught by something else. As the storm had cleared, I could now see an array of shapes and colors in the water below me. And I soon discovered that I was sailing on a reef. Tubataha Reef, one of the most beloved dive sites in the world. With over 1,200 different species of marine life, this protected reef is not just diverse, but it's ancient, as it finished forming around 1 million years ago. This World Heritage Site is home to a vast array of fish, turtles, and of course, the largest fish of them all, the whale shark. I explored the reef, and as I did, I ended up finding some Titan triggerfish, which some of you might remember from my Australia episode. Anyways, it soon began to rain again, so I continued east, and caught a rather cool sunset. I continued sailing through day 34, as I still had a bit of ocean to go. And you know what? It was kinda nice just sailing, especially after fighting a mythical beast. So when the next 2 days were just more sailing, I didn't complain. It was a good change of pace. And outside of a little rain, not much happened at all. But of course, I was about to start hunting a very different type of creature. So when I spotted land on day 37, I prepared myself, as Mindanao is also a very different type of island. Mindanao is the second largest island in the Philippines, and is home to the tallest point in the country, Mount Apo. But what makes Mindanao different from the other islands is its heavily tropical and in some places marshy environments. That leads to both unique animals and a large output of agricultural produce. But I had to think about where best to look for the Chanak. I followed the shoreline and figured that it would probably be out in the forests of the island. So, after sailing along the shore for a bit, I waited that night and listened for cries. But yeah, I got nothing. So the next morning, I headed into the forests of the island, knowing fully that my hunt had just begun. However, before I could make it far into my search, I found some very special animals. The Philippine tarsier is found in the southeastern part of the country, and these guys aren't just cute, but they're also really cool. Tarsiers have the largest eyes relative to their bodies of any mammal. Oh, and these little guys are the only primates that are entirely carnivorous, as they eat spiders, lizards, and even snakes. The Philippines is the best country to spot this animal, so definitely try to find some if you visit. Next morning, I continued my travels east across the island. I hadn't heard any cries yet, but there was a wonder that I knew of on the east coast of the island, so I headed in that direction. However, I soon found myself in a rather marshy area, so I decided that it was fishing time. No, not again. Oh no. Seeing that my favorite reptile was once again in front of me, I crafted a boat and began rowing. This was a bad idea though, as I ended up rowing way too close to some of them. It was just so hard to see them until they were right below me, so I eventually decided to just row to the banks of the marsh, and from there, I continued on my way. Only I was once again interrupted that very evening. I looked around frantically, and then I saw it. But a rather speedy zombie distracted me. So I towered up, and then had to stay the night up here. I woke the next morning and fought some zombies, but the Chanak was gone. I decided to just keep heading east towards the wonder that I wanted to see. So I took this river and did just that. That afternoon, I began to climb up and over some mountains. But soon enough, the sun began to set. And I soon realized that the Chanak was the one hunting me. No. This time I spotted it rather quickly, but not in time to stop it from attacking. Ooh, okay. Ooh, duh! I will drop kick you. Okay. Okay. It dealt so much damage to me. Yeah, one more hit and I'm dead. So I had no choice but to run. And after running for a bit, I towered up once more. I woke up on day 41 with an absence of baby cries. That's something I didn't think I would be saying today. Anyways, I healed up the best I could, before then continuing east. At this point, I suspected that the Chanak spawned at night in the forest, as I had only seen it at sunset. So with that in mind, I just kept trekking, noting that I was both low on food and health. And of course, that's when I heard a hiss. I knew I had to use the very last of my sprint to run. And after having done so, I was now in a bad position. I was not only low on health, but I now couldn't sprint at all. Oh, and to make matters worse, the sun was setting. Finally though, on a good note, I had just stumbled across the very wonder that I was looking for. The Enchanted River. The Hinatuan Enchanted River is a rather unique stretch of saltwater that is connected to the ocean. This river is unique because of its depth of around 80 feet, or 24 meters. However, there are cave systems within the depths of this vibrant blue water that go even deeper. This, along with the legend of fish inhabiting these waters that cannot be caught, truly adds to the enchanting part of the river. And even though you can't swim in it, mostly due to the preservation of the river, it's certainly worth a visit. As the sun set that evening, I fully expected to hear more cries. However, I heard nothing, which just confused me. Next morning, I went to get more food. I did some fishing and ended up crafting boots from the diamonds I still had. From there, I did even more fishing, before then healing back up. But as I tried to head back, I saw that my boat was occupied. The evening sun soon set in. And now with me approaching the forest, I surely expected to hear more cries. Yet the forest was silent again. Perhaps I wasn't far enough inland? So to answer that, on day 43, I decided to head much further inland. I filled up my water at this river, and then I climbed the nearby mountains. Only, as I did, I saw something in the distance. I approached it and saw not only a large bamboo forest, but also what appeared to be an abandoned tower of sorts. I walked towards the tower and decided that this would be my headquarters for hunting the Chanak. So that being said, I prepared myself as the sun eventually set. And I waited for the cries. And tonight, I heard them again. But I didn't see it anywhere. I ran to the tower as fast as I could. And of course, in the tower, I was met with this. After that, I climbed up the ladder. Only I didn't stay here for long, because I decided to go back out and find it again. And of course, that was a bad idea. Yeah, I had to retreat. There was simply no other option. I woke up the next morning knowing that I needed a plan. And I soon came up with a rather decent one. So I got right to work, starting with fishing, where I somehow managed to fish up a power 4 bow. Anyways, I then got to chopping, and then sand collecting. Yeah, I want to see if any of you can guess what I'm doing before I finish it. Maybe the next thing I craft will tell you, because I made a whole lot of signs. Finally, that evening, I started to dig out this tower area. And on day 45, I began work on my sand trap. Yes, my plan was to suffocate the baby. I really hope my neighbors don't hear me saying this. Anyways, I cleared the path of the sand. Yeah, I would need to time this just right, but it was certainly worth trying. So, with my trap ready and nightfall approaching, all I had to do was wait. And just as I expected, I heard the cries. Only this time, it found me pretty quickly. Ooh, there he is. So now I just had to enact this plan. This is where I made a terrible mistake. See, I'd made a critical error in only placing one layer of sand for the trap. And of course, that did nothing. So yeah, I started rebuilding the trap. But the Chanak was still hitting me from below. In fact, I had to escape up to the roof just to heal myself. But I persisted, as I was going to get this trap to work. After many more hits, I had finally rebuilt it. And now, I just had to wait for the right moment. The trap immediately began dealing constant damage to the Chanak. I jumped down to take a closer look, but it just hit me again. However, after a while of waiting and listening to its health deplete, I had officially killed the Chanak. Yes, that's right, the demon baby fell for the classic sand trap. The next morning, I checked just to be sure. And yeah, it was definitely dead. So now, it was time for me to head back to my ship. The sky soon opened up and a strong storm rolled in. I headed in the direction of my ship and eventually I reached the shore. The storm died down as I rowed towards my boat. And the next day, I finally reached it. I was once again reunited with Basket, and yeah, he still has no idea what I just did. Anyways, I adjusted my course and set sail north, in the direction of the next creature. The Bongnisnis, a giant one-eyed creature that is most prominently known for its laugh. As for its danger, well, these creatures aren't exactly known to be evil, just rather brash and hazardous. Therefore, I won't hunt this one to vanquish it, but rather just to observe it. And while the Bongnisnis can be found in multiple spots around Luzon, I'll be searching for it here, in southern Luzon. So that being said, I continued my sailing, as I had a little ways to go. I sailed on through the next few days, making my way further north and into the Visayas. But while I do that, I want to go ahead and say thanks to my team that helped me make this video. I'll actually have my very first end credits for this video, so you can see each individual member who helped. But I want to give a special thanks to Matori and JamboHatdawg, my associate editor and my thumbnail designer. The two of them live in the Philippines and were able to help me a ton with this video, so I really appreciate it. But with that being said, I finally ended up spotting land on day 51, and while this definitely wasn't Luzon, I was curious to see which island it was. I ended up finding this river and decided to take it. But not long after following it, I realized that I was on the island of Bohol, because the most famous landmark of the Philippines sat before me. The Chocolate Hills, an incredible array of limestone deposits that, in the dry season, take on a light chocolate color. And while the number of hills isn't exactly known, there are at least 1,200 of them. Yeah, that makes this a top travel location for anyone who wants to see unique landscapes. You could really say that about the entirety of the Philippines, but the Chocolate Hills are definitely something special. As it turns out, I'd made it here just in time, because after climbing up one, I caught a great sunset view. But I've got places to be, so the next morning, I headed back to my ship. I continued my sailing journey, as I was now officially in the Visayas, this archipelago consisting of multiple islands here in the center of the country. The sailing wasn't too eventful though. No, in fact, nothing really happened on day 52 or day 53. I was just following the coasts of these islands. So, in order to make my travels more efficient, I decided to sail through the night. The next day, I came across yet another island. But this island had some structures on the beach. I went to explore them, but I didn't see any chests inside. I did see this fridge though, that was made out of 2 iron blocks. Yeah, I immediately took them. From there, I decided that I might as well do a little ship upgrade. So I got to work on the second tier of my cabin. And the next morning, I had made a lot of progress. But that's when a storm started up nearby. I just continued building, but I also kept an eye on the winds. Not long after, I felt myself being pulled towards what I could only imagine was a cyclone. So yeah, I had to sail away. I continued sailing through day 56, as I also needed fuel at this point. After finding another island, I pulled over and did some collecting, before building what I could that evening. It wasn't until the next day that I would finally finish the second floor though. I used the leftover wood for fuel, and carried on towards Luzon. Eventually, I was hoping to make the second floor into my kitchen, but I'll probably do that after this mythical creature. I just hoped that I would reach Luzon soon. Yeah, this was already turning out to be the longest leg of my trip so far. So, when I saw this tiny island, I went mining for stone. Yeah, remember the fridge iron that I stole? Well, I was about to use that to craft another engine. And I did so right as the sun set. Finally, the next morning, I could sail with speed. At least a little more speed than what I had. And with that, I headed back out into the open ocean. Only this time, I wasn't in the open waters for very long. No, I found yet another island that afternoon. And judging by its size, I had finally arrived at Luzon. Luzon is the largest and most well-known island in the Philippines, thanks to the fact that it hosts over half of the country's population. The capital of the Philippines, Manila, can also be found here. And while I was on this island earlier, there is still plenty more for me to see here. After following the coast for a while, I eventually found a spot to get off at. From here, I began my trek towards one of the areas that the Bungnis niece resides in. However, it wasn't long before I was reunited with a certain animal. Yeah, I was being attacked by a huge cobra, and there wasn't much I could do about it. Until I was left on 1.5 hearts. Yeah, I ran. Having finally reached a safe distance, I healed back up. I can't exactly say that I felt welcomed back to Luzon. The next morning, I decided to stay along the coast, rather than go inland for, reasons. I still wasn't where the Bungnis niece resides, but after a bit of rowing, I did find this river. So I decided to take it. And upon doing so, I found myself in a rather large lake. Only it didn't take long for me to realize that I was very much in the right location now, because before me was the tall volcano. The tall volcano is a currently active volcano that sits within this caldera. And just for reference, a caldera is the depression formed when a volcano erupts and collapses. So yeah, this one is pretty prominent. But that's not the only unique thing about the Tall volcano, as this little island within Tall Lake is called Vulcan Point, meaning that this is an island within a lake, within an island, within a lake, within an island. Yeah, if you got lost there, I don't blame you. Just know that it is both a geologic and geographic spectacle. I walked along the ridge of the volcano that very evening. As I rode around the lake the next morning, I found what looked to be a graveyard. Oh, and up on the ridge, there is another structure of some kind. I went ahead and approached the graveyard, and that's when I found this chest. Yeah, apparently this graveyard was haunted or something, and now I couldn't get this ghost to stop following me. This was actually a serious issue, as it almost ended up killing me here. Yeah, so I just rode away. I'll have to go the long way to reach the other structure. And that's just what I did. I tree jumped for essentially the rest of the day. I did end up making it all the way up the mountain. But of course, as I approached the structure, I saw that it was a pillager base. I reluctantly approached the base the next morning, and could hear many pillagers within. However, I was able to safely sneak some loot from this building. I then went with my normal approach and climbed up onto the roof. But after one managed to hit me, it seemed as though I couldn't escape them at all. Yeah, they were just in every room, and there were so many of them. So I decided to play it safe, and I just left. After all, I was in the right area to find the Bungnisnis, so I should probably focus on that now. With that being said, I hiked back down the mountain and headed east. As I tree jumped the next day, a large mountain came into view. I decided to head in that direction, only, as I did, I saw something huge moving out of nowhere. There was no way that I actually found it this quickly, but my doubts were soon answered. As I approached the giant, it definitely looked hostile. Well, that is until it started dancing on this azalea. But it soon began to approach me, so just to be safe, I ran towards the mountain, only to discover that it was stuck yet again. This time, I decided to help it out a bit. Yeah, sometimes I wonder why I make the choices that I do. Anyways, after freeing him, I ran back towards the mountain, and I seemed to have lost him. Only that was a grave assumption. Yeah, it was definitely mad at me. After fleeing for a bit, I seemed to have lost it. Only it wasn't long until I found myself staring at a very long pathway that led right up the mountain. Naturally, I followed it. The pathway continued for a while, until the terrain became too steep, and it transitioned into ladders. So I did some climbing. And yeah, at this point, I was pretty high up. But when I reached the top, I was a bit confused, as there wasn't really anything up here. I climbed onto this branch and took a look around, and that's when I saw it. A large cave opening that seemed to be glowing red. However, my explorations would soon come to a halt, as the sun was setting. So I just slept outside the cave. Only what I didn't know is that this cave was the very cave that the Bungnisnis spawns in. So when I went to look in the cave the next morning, I was in for a surprise. Yeah, this guy was eating the mobs inside the cave. Suddenly, the cave was filled with a thick layer of fog, and the only thing that I could see was a large silhouette heading my way. I quickly backed away, but when I went to look back, I saw it just sort of staring at me. So, out of curiosity, I decided to head to the other side of the mountain. And yeah, it just kind of stared at me from here, too. So you know what, Bungnisnis? You seem perfectly happy eating your little mobs in your cave, so I honestly won't disturb you from here. You just keep being you. Don't let anyone change you, not even Basket. So, having parted ways with Bungnisnis, I had only one mythical creature to go. And little did I know, it would be the most difficult one I've ever tried to defeat. But before I start my final hunt, there was one more location on the west coast of Luzon that I really wanted to see. So with that, I made my way west, and reached this large lake by that afternoon. As I followed along the lake the next morning, it eventually filtered out into the ocean. So from here, I just kept along the coast. And as I passed more volcanoes, I figured now would be a good time to mention that the Philippines hosts 24 active volcanoes. And that's just because the country lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is a tectonic line that experiences most of the world's earthquakes and volcanic activity. But volcanoes aside, I'd finally reached my destination the next day. Yes, I'd arrived at the city of Vegan. The city of Vegan was established in 1572 as an essential hub for the then Spanish Philippines. But to understand the history of this city, we have to go a little bit further back. See, a rather famous explorer by the name of Ferdinand Magellan stumbled across the Philippines in 1521. After claiming the islands for Spain, they were then named Las Filipinas, after the King of Spain, Philip II. But back to Vegan, this city is claimed as a World Heritage City, simply due to its age and preservation of Spanish colonial architecture. I explored the historic city and entered whatever shops I could find. It was here that I took an anvil and some banners. But my shopping spree didn't last long, as the afternoon was approaching. So I checked myself into a hotel that seemed to be rather busy. Anyways, I found a room on the second floor, and as the night sky set in, I looked at the view from my window. Next day, I took one last look around the city, as I still have one more creature to find, and I want to make sure I have plenty of time for this one. So, with that being said, I headed back to the shore and started my trip back to my ship. This trip took a while, as it was basically non-stop rowing, and as I've established, Luzon is simply huge. So, while I travel south, I might as well reveal what this final creature is. The Manananggal is a dreadfully evil spirit that is able to detach her upper body and fly around, hunting for victims to either eat or drain. This creature is not only one of the most infamous of the Philippines, but she is also perhaps the most deadly, and easily the most terrifying. I will find this creature on Samar Island. I finally reached my ship on day 72, and was promptly reunited with Basket. But before leaving, I decided to craft him his own little space. Oh, and I also used the anvil I borrowed to properly give him his name. From there, I set off towards Samar Island, hugging the coast of Luzon as I went. Only that same night, I saw yet another display of a natural spectacle. While I sail along the bioluminescence tonight, I might as well explain just what it is. In the Philippines, bioluminescence is caused mostly by plankton and bacteria that emit light when disturbed. And while the Philippines is a great place to see this phenomenon, it's mostly observed in the warmer months, and in specific areas. So be sure to do your research if you plan on seeing this spectacle. With that being said, I found myself sailing further along the coast the next day. And while this trip shouldn't take nearly as long as the last, I still had a good stretch of Luzon to follow. A stretch that includes the very thing taking shape in front of me. That's right, I certainly hadn't seen the last of the volcanoes here. No, in fact, we were coming up on my personal favorite. The Mayon volcano. At over 8,000 feet, or 2,400 meters, this may be the most perfectly shaped volcano in the world, which has certainly led to it becoming a tourist hotspot. But this incredible volcano isn't just a pretty sight. Since the 17th century, there have been over 30 prominent eruptions recorded from it, making Mayon the most active volcano in the Philippines. And while some people have summited the volcano, that is a very dangerous task that requires a permit due to the unpredictable nature of it. But exploring in Minecraft certainly has its perks. As the next morning, I decided to start climbing up the side of it. This was a daunting task, as some parts of it were quite steep. But by that afternoon, I had reached the summit. However, I went ahead and started my descent, as I needed to get to Samar Island as soon as I could. So on day 75, I got right back to sailing, now in a more southwest direction. I was now finally sailing in the open ocean, which was great because that meant that when I saw land the next day, it had to be Samar. Samar is the third largest island in the Philippines, and it's home to a plethora of caves and naturally stunning sights. It's often considered to be the gem of the Philippines, as it's not as touristy as some of the other islands, and that's a shame, because it really is beautiful. I soon experienced this beauty firsthand as a town came into view, and a rather lively looking one. I explored the town a bit the next morning, but I also knew that I had to get moving. So I quickly got to rowing. My plan was to row along the shore until I see a structure or cave, or just anything for me to explore really. And, luckily for me, it wasn't long before something did come into view. A tower appeared in the distance, and, after approaching it, it looked to be some sort of old colonial tower. And it also looked as though there was a way to climb it. Yes, the Spanish, infamous for their ladder parkour. Alright, this is my second try. This is coming from a former Bed Wars player. I used to make Bed Wars videos back in the day. Very few of you probably know that. But, yeah. Yeah, this wasn't exactly an easy climb for me. But I eventually reached the top, and jumped to these vines hanging off of this cannon. Now, the only issue was that there wasn't really anything up here. And with the sun setting, I had no idea where to go from here. But I was soon distracted by my sudden overheating. Yeah, I quickly opened my backpack and got my leaf clothes on. Anyways, with the night sky now setting in, I began to look around. And soon enough, I saw something. It looked like a tiny structure of sorts. But yeah, I really couldn't tell what it was from here. So that's exactly where I headed the next morning. I slowly made my way through the dense forestry of the island, before uncovering what appeared to be a large abandoned structure. As I explored the area, I saw lots of mobs hiding in the dark, so I just didn't go over there. Instead, I went up to the second floor and walked over to what looked like a mine shaft. Regardless, as more mobs began to spawn, I headed up the tall tower at the front. I then made my way up a ridiculously tall spiral staircase, only to find something very alarming at the top. Yeah, this was definitely eerie. I could only assume that this belonged to the Manananggal. So I headed down the stairs a little, and decided to wait here, hoping that the creature would return to whatever nest was above me. However, as the night approached, nothing happened. So I began to descend the staircase. My health was being drained, but I couldn't figure out where the creature was. That is, until I got my first glimpse of it. I jumped up onto the trees and tried attacking it. But I only got 2 solid hits in before I knew I had to run. Yeah, one more hit, and I was dead. And of course, there were mobs everywhere. I ran into the forest, but that honestly wasn't much better. I was eventually able to tower up, though. Yeah, I knew I had to head back to the town and actually prepare for this fight. There was simply no way for me to kill it with what I had. But I also had to be extra cautious as I approached the shore, because even a small fall would kill me. As I reached the ocean, I healed back up, and from there, I rode back to the town. Upon reaching it that afternoon, I began to search for anything that could be useful. Lots of the houses didn't have any helpful loot at all, but I did find this block of iron that I used to craft iron leggings. The next morning, as I looked at the crafting recipes for arrows, a giant centipede decided to roll through and kill some villagers. Anyways, I don't have any feathers, so no arrows. Instead, I would have to resort to another idea that I had in mind, but it was by no means ideal. I collected some wood, which I used to craft boats, and those of you who saw my Scotland episode might know what I'm going to attempt. From there, I stopped by my boat and told Basket that the boat is his if I die. I then got some food crates, before heading back to the abandoned structure. After reaching the tower that afternoon, I arrived at the structure the next morning. From here, I just climbed up the tower. And I waited. Only this time, I didn't have to wait for the sun to set. Yeah, all I could do was run, as I couldn't even reach it this time. Even as I tried to run away, it just kept hitting me, until I was able to escape to the forest again. I healed up, and then headed right back. But after climbing the tower, I didn't see her anywhere. Only that would very much change first thing the next morning. Yeah, this was very inconvenient, as I wasn't even ready. I managed to get one hit in before once again fleeing down the stairs. I headed back to the coast so I could fill up my water. I also went ahead and crafted a water bucket while I was here, so I could essentially have an infinite water supply. And yeah, I reluctantly turned around and headed back. Only this time, there was a large storm brewing nearby. I knew that I had to kill it today, partially because the storm would make it more cinematic. But I was soon in for a surprise. Yeah, a massive cyclone was ahead, and it was definitely coming our way, so I had to make this quick. As I climbed up the tower, I didn't see her. I went ahead and dropped this boat to the very bottom. But upon heading up to the roof, I saw that the cyclone was getting near. Only, out of nowhere, I was being drained. So I ran and escaped through the same route yet again. I then healed back up, and decided to go back. Only this time, it was actually in the boat. I went in to do some damage, but I had to leave to heal again. However, as I went to hit it again, the worst possible thing happened. I was in the cyclone. Now, this isn't my first time storm riding, but I do know that this will end with me having to place water at just the right time. In the meantime, I was swung around with tons of other blocks. The only thing hurt by this was my computer. Yeah, it was a little bit laggy in here. But then the storm got ready to spit me out, and I got my water bucket in my hand. My countless hours in Bed Wars had certainly come in handy. But before I could think about it, I had to get underground. The storm seemed to be calming down, which meant that it was time. I surfaced from my underground burrow, and then I went in for the kill. She didn't stop hitting me, but I didn't either. That is, until I defeated her. After all of that, I had done it. It was over. I had defeated the Manananggal. And now, I just had to return to my ship. I walked through the ruins of the storm, before finally reaching the shore. I rode my way back to the town, and the next morning, I began my search for kitchen decorations. After all, base review will be on day 99, and I definitely have some improvements that I want to make. Funny how I can go from defeating a mythical monster of death to essentially shopping at Home Depot. Anyways, that evening, I did some wood collecting. And the next morning, I got even more wood, before crafting this stove. I then set sail for the Western Visayas, as I still needed to do a segment on the Carabao. So with that, I headed west. And my travels took quite some time, as I navigated through tons of tiny islands. I also ran out of fuel and had to do a lot of chopping. So while I travel west, let me rank the difficulty of the Philippines. See, the Philippines was harder than I expected when it comes to the weather. Everything else was relatively manageable, aside from the cobras, of course. But with all of that in mind, I will give the Philippines a difficulty rating of 7 out of 10. Finally, on day 94, as I sailed through the Western Visayas, some mobs appeared on the shore ahead of me, and they were definitely carabaos. That was confirmed when I approached them. And so, without further ado, let's talk about just one more thing. Carabaos are water buffaloes that have been incredibly useful to the history of this country. Mainly used in plowing rice paddies, these guys have likely been alongside the native Filipinos for thousands of years. And while it is disputed in some places, most people consider them to be the national animal of the Philippines. Anyways, it was really time for me to lock in and do some base work. So that, I worked on the kitchen some, before then getting some bamboo for a trim that I wanted to add. But it wasn't nearly enough. So the next day, I went and got more. But that wasn't enough either. So I went again. And yeah, you get the pattern. So I used all of day 96 to just collect bamboo. I took some breaks to fish, but when I returned the next day, I placed all of the trapdoors that I could craft. I still had a few to go, but I just decided to use the rest of the day to craft some furniture. I made some chairs for this bar, before then making an epic hangout couch for Basket. Yeah, he loves it. Anyways, I did some more fishing, before arriving at the final day of base work. I used today to finish my bamboo collecting, which worked out because I now had enough trim to place. And with that, it was time to review my base. I woke up on day 99 and looked around my base, before giving it a final verdict. Yeah, this one's gonna be a bit short, because there are only 3 things to really rate here, starting with the kitchen, which I quite like. It's nothing compared to my kitchen in the Hawaii episode, but it's decent. Now for the overall style. This is where I get the most points, I think, because I maintained a traditional Filipino boat style while also personalizing it. Yeah, I really like this design. But now for the efficiency. As a boat base, my goal is to sail fast, and this thing just wasn't that fast. So, all in all, while I like the look of it, I have to give this one a 6 out of 10. Not bad, but not great. But with that being said, I still have one more day. I woke up on day 100 and went to hang out with the carabaos. As I did, I couldn't help but think about the last 100 days, and the spectacle that has been the Philippines. These were some of the most beautiful islands I've ever visited in this series, with some of the most impressive views and wildlife. And even though the mythical creatures were difficult this time, it really was the location that stole the show for me. Because the Philippines not only hosts stunning landscapes and wonders, but from what I'm told, this country houses some of the kindest people. It's very tourist friendly, and you should absolutely take a visit, because there is nowhere on Earth quite like the Philippines. Alright. Okay, Basket. It has been an honor. Yeah. You as well. With all of that said and done, it is about that time. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.